G'day Hammerhead! So welcome back to the bench, and today we got these two handsome orange drills right here. We're going to be looking at AEG/Ridgid if you're in some parts of the world. We got the old 26mm rotary hammer, we got the new 26mm rotary hammer, and let's see how they go. So to the eagle-eyed Americans out there, yes, these are actually just the same as your Ridgid tools that you guys have in North America. So I'm just treating them the same. So the old one is the BBH 18BL, and the new one is the A18 FRH. Both of these drills, incidentally, made in 2022, but I guess this is going to be the last of them. So these guys do look pretty similar. I guess an obvious stylistic difference is that the older one has all this crazy grip going on it. It's all very rough and grippy and sort of rugged looking. The new one is smoothed down a little bit, and yeah, I do prefer that. So they both have these rafter hooks on the top. Pretty snazzy, not too many hammers out there have them, so I guess, you know, they must be useful for some of you out there. The other cool thing about the old version, it's got this little button in here which actually turns on the light when you grip it. So yeah, not sure why. I guess that would be handy for some situations, and I guess they've just decided they don't need that with this version because, like every other power tool in the world, the trigger just turns the light on. Now on the box, the new one boasts 50% less vibration than the old model, and unfortunately I can't actually test that because they are talking about just this handle part. So we've got the normal kind of baffled springy part up here for the vibration, but then the bottom is also sort of articulated. So they're just talking about the handle being less vibration-y, which is interesting because this one was already quite a smooth ride, I thought. And they also claim the new version is 10% faster drilling than the old version. So we will see. If you've been paying attention to TTI's rotary hammers for the last couple of years, this should not be a surprise to you at all because it's basically what they did with Milwaukee as well. For example, here's the old Milwaukee 1-inch hammer compared to the old AEG. You can see that, you know, there's a definite family resemblance here. It looks like they've changed the case really, but they've almost certainly kept the insides pretty similar. And you can also see that with the new Milwaukee. So I guess they've designed their new tool for the Milwaukee, and then they've passed that same sort of design down to the AEG and also the Ryobi. Look at that. So a little bit of history if you're not familiar. Basically TTI, Tektronic Industries, is a giant Chinese corporation that has gobbled up all these other brands. They own Milwaukee, AEG and Ryobi. Hence the family resemblance with all these tools. They also own a whole bunch of other stuff, probably half the shit in your house. AEG was originally an old German company. AEG basically stands for German General Electric, so it's like GE but Germany. And like all old German companies, it's probably best not to wonder about their history too much. Matter of fact, I've got an old made in Germany AEG drill that I'm going to fix up at some point, so I keep telling myself. And as for Ridgid, well, we have Ridgid tools here in Australia, but they're not actually these orange power tools. They're these other kind of more specialized things here. And Ridgid is actually owned by Emerson, this old American company that claims to have invented the first pipe wrench, modern pipe wrench. I don't know anything about wrenches. So Ridgid is basically licensing these tools from TTI to be sold in the North American market. Going by the whole Milwaukee Ryobi AEG thing, I'm pretty sure that TTI is actually doing all the designing as well as the manufacturing, and Emerson here is just licensing out the Ridgid tools to sell in North America. Alright, so let's look at the specs. We got two names, two model numbers here. I'm just going to call them the old one and the new one. So the price is $399 dollary dues versus $429. That's actually just gone up from $399 like a week or two ago, because right now we have got some crazy inflation happening. Weight is 2.9 kilos versus 3, so just like the Milwaukee, the new one is a little bit heavier. So round up to 2.9 kilos there, and the new one weighs 3 kilos. Capacity, they both reckon 26 millimeters or about an inch. Impact energy is the same, 2.5 joules. Impacts per minute, so 4,800 versus 5,000 for the new one. And because of that, the impact power of the new one is slightly higher, 12,500 versus 12,000 joules per minute. And the new one also rotates slightly faster at 1500 RPM versus 1400 RPM. So they do say the new one drills about 10% faster, and we'll see about that. But interestingly enough, like theoretically, going by the impact power, which is just these two multiplied together, that's only about 4% more power. So yeah, we'll see. Okay, let's check the revs. So that's just got the freshly charged Force battery in there. About 1260, so not quite the 1400. And for the new one, about 1420, so not quite 1500. Pretty close though. All right, so let's get drilling. First test, as usual, is going to be the 12 by 80 millimeter speed drill into 32 MPa concrete. Let's see how they go. Alrighty, nicely done there in the 12 by 80 mil speed drill. So the new one ended up with an average of 9.47 seconds versus the old one at 10.67 seconds. So that's actually about 14% faster for the new one. Not sure where they're getting their 10%, but maybe we'll see that in the next test. Alright, so next test is max capacity drills. So this is 26 millimeters. They're going to drill in 80 mil again, and let's see how they handle it. Alright, so for the max capacity, these guys ended up down the end, just behind the other 26 mil drills we've got on here, the DeWalt's. Now for the new one, we had an average of 84.87 seconds there and 89.25 for the old drill. So that's about 5% faster for the new one. And that's telling us a couple of things. Firstly, you know, the bigger bits are just going to drill slower. I mean, these guys had much smaller bits, so don't worry about that part. But if we compare back to the 12 mil, that's sort of suggesting they do have a pretty good impact force compared to the rest of the field. But then potentially they're just sort of slowing down with this bigger job, and you know, maybe the motors aren't quite as powerful. And this is even with that Force sort of high output sort of battery they got going on too. And next up, we're just going to be doing drill only to compare their drilling power. So drilling into some timber with a spade bit, 25 mils like that, using one of these SDS adapters. Let's see how they go. So drilling through that pine, they ended up with an average of 4.02 seconds for the new one and 4.5 seconds for the old one. So that is actually about 10% faster. And finally, we're doing some chipping. So we give them a 20 mil chisel like that, mark out 50 millimeters from the edge of a concrete brick, see how quickly they can knock that edge off. Let's go. Alright, so for the chipping we averaged 0.88 seconds versus 1.65 seconds. So that's about a 46% difference. And so that's a big difference, but I really like this result because taken together with all the rest of the drilling we've done, this is sort of suggesting that the main performance difference between the new one and the old one is actually the hammering. Maybe she hammers a little bit faster, but she does seem to hammer a bit harder too, which is strange because I don't know why they're rated to the same. We saw the same thing with the Milwaukee as well, except the new Milwaukee, they do boast a higher impact force there. So I reckon that's where the main improvement has come from. So there you go, Hammerheads. TTI has produced a nice incremental improvement there. Rotary hammers seem to be a kind of tricky thing to design because, you know, they don't bring out new models all that often compared to things like impacts or whatever, or maybe car people just whine about wanting more power all the time.
Oh no, don't want that.
But anyway, I do think this is a nice improvement. It is a little bit heavier, so taken all together, I think these results are really telling us that the main improvement here has actually been in the hammer mechanism, and it's definitely different. I mean, there's a different sort of gearing arrangement there on these two bodies. This one's bigger, it is heavier as well, and you know, there's a lot of metal stuff in there. If we look at the old hammer cylinder from an old drill I have restored, you know, that's actually the hammer bore in there. Maybe they just made the hammer cylinder bigger or something like that, just to give it a little bit more hitting power. But anyway, I do think this is really quite a nice little tool. It's a nice little upgrade. I really do notice that extra wiggly vibration control there, especially doing the 1-inch drill. That was really nice. One little nitpicky thing I have is that if you've got the depth rod on there, it actually fouls on the rafter hook, and you kind of can't just easily adjust that. But you know, I guess that's a pretty minor thing. You would get used to it. Otherwise, she's just quite a nice little unit. If you're on Team Orange, I'm sure you'll be very happy with her. But for me personally, coming from Milwaukee, I've used Milwaukee for years, and coming to this, which is basically I guess a scaled down Milwaukee, I am a little bit disappointed with, I mean, just the fact that it costs almost as much as the Milwaukee drill does, but it's clearly just a sort of tuned down version of it. And I find that a little bit frustrating with the Orange tools, because like, we know they can make the full power Milwaukee stuff. I just wish the rotary hammer price reflected that difference, you know? I'm sure there is more of a difference with the other AEG tools compared to the Milwaukee tools. It's just that rotary hammers, you know, they have these functions, they got all this stuff inside. They tend to be one of the more expensive tools just inherently. And anyway, hammerheads, that's going to be it from me, so I'll scratch yous later, and happy drilling. So we give them a little spade bit like that. Spade bit? What the fuck is this called?